Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. Ooh, we are on episode 8 of Moriarty the Patriot. I have a rule of 8. If you've never seen my reactions before, when you have an 11 to 13 episode season and that's what you got, the 8th episode is usually really good. It's just a rule of thumb. It starts out the final act of the first part of the season, and I know that this is technically 2 seasons. So this is leading up into the end of the first season. We got episodes 8, 9, 10, and 11. So we got 4 episodes left of the first season, which I'm pretty excited for. But yeah, I've always got a thing. Episode 8, if you got an 11 to 13 episode series, is usually a good one. So I'm pretty excited. I'm not going to lie. So yeah, but a study in S, Act 1. I had some technical difficulties in the last episode, and I think it was my punishment for making you all wait a week. I think it was my punishment for watching ahead and making you all wait a week. So that's what happened. So I don't know if I'm going to watch these 2 back to back. I might not tempt fate and actually watch this episode and then at least wait a few days before watching Act 2. I don't know. But Sherlock is in the picture now. Moriarty thinks he may be a tiny, tiny little threat. Maybe. Okay. But I really love this iteration of Sherlock. He is wonderful. He is smart. He's charismatic. He's funny. He's friendly. He's super intelligent. He looks like he can do kung fu. He's my favorite maybe iteration of Sherlock that's modern. I don't know. I really like BBC Sherlock, but that's a whole different ballgame. And we've not even met Watson yet, to be honest. So I'm curious to know about Watson's iteration too, what his version is as well. But yeah, Sherlock's in the picture. He's kind of the foil to Moriarty, as he should be. Some of you were commenting like soulmates. I'm like, yeah, of course, Sherlock and Moriarty, they're the ultimate rivals. When you think of literary figures that have, chase of wit and banter between each other, Moriarty and Sherlock are it's one of the classic pairings, right? So I'm really excited now to see where this story goes, because Moriarty's everything's been going smoothly, and the noetic, everything was okay, but Sherlock kind of figured it out. He just didn't have any proof. Moriarty's very good at hiding his tracks. He's very good at erasing the trail. And so I wonder now that Sherlock has got like an inkling into this mystery, because he loves an exquisite mystery, as we found out. I wonder if Sherlock's got his nose in Moriarty's business officially, if he's going to start being like a bloodhound and sniffing Moriarty out and finding his crimes. That would be pretty cool. And it's probably going to be Moriarty's biggest problem, because he has a plan. Moriarty has a plan to change society, and here comes Sherlock to just muck it up. So yeah, as you can tell, I rewatched episode 7 right before this. I was grinning from ear to ear. Sherlock's one of my favorite literary figures, and so this version of him is pretty great. I'm excited to see more, but with our red-eyed Moriarty and our blue-eyed Sherlock. So we shall see, won't we? But yeah, let's not waste any time. A Study in S. A Study in Scarlet, I think that's the original title. Study in S, Act 1. Like I said, I don't know if I'll be able to watch Act 2. We shall see. But in any case, let's start this, shall we? I hope you all enjoy the reaction, but we're going to start episode 8 of Moriarty the Patriot here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. I love this Sherlock. As you all probably have guessed by this point, I am a massive simp for Sherlock. I love Sherlock as a literary character, and this version may be one of my favorites that I've seen, because it's funny, he's Sherlock, like you can tell that he's Sherlock, but he's not. I think some versions of Sherlock don't know what to do with this character, because the original Sherlock is very, the original Sherlock in the novels is very much tied to the genre and the times that he was written in. So he is maybe somewhat more stoic, but he's still jovial and still has this sense of wonderment at the whole mystery of it and solving crimes. And he has this very like dominant kind of he knows exactly what he's doing sort of thing, even when he sometimes doesn't. And I like that this Sherlock kind of has the same aura about him, but he's so much more jovial and congenial and quirky. And I love it. It doesn't compromise who we know Sherlock as a character is, but it adds so much more to it. And there's so many little moments. There's so many tiny moments with the animation in this episode that I was like, oh, I want to go back and rewatch that. That's all I kept thinking of. I was like, I want to go back and rewatch this episode because I really, really like it. Episode of 8, the rule of 8 lives up to its standards. We're setting up the final act. And the final act of season 1 is Moriarty testing Sherlock. Now, here's the thing. We don't know about this Count if he's actually a bad noble or not. We don't know that. All we know is that Moriarty is testing Sherlock to see if he truly is going to be... My thing is that, Moriarty, you're digging your own grave, because if you just left Sherlock alone, as we established in this episode, Sherlock's kind of... He's kind of just, rogue, a bohemian, as Gregson calls him, a bohemian. He's just kind of a freelance consulting detective. A consulting detective. I love it. I love criminal consulting detective. But he's just a freelance investigator who's just waiting for Scotland Yard to give him a call when they can't figure something out. And he's just sitting by and he doesn't have any other job. He just goes around looking for cases and experiments up in his room on different methods and things that can be useful, which we'll talk about that. But he wasn't really actively looking for Moriarty. That's the thing. Moriarty's paranoia about Sherlock, I think, may be his undoing, because Sherlock wasn't looking for Moriarty. He is now. Now that he's connecting the dots. But he wasn't to begin with in this episode. He was perfectly content doing his experiments and doing whatever. But Moriarty seems so paranoid that Sherlock could be a threat that he's like, we just need to get rid of him now. But the way he sets it up, I'm like, surely... But it's also, Moriarty could have done better. He could have made it more... He could have found a way to make it to where it exactly looked like Sherlock did it and there was no question. But he didn't do that. He wants it to be a test to see if Sherlock is that good. And I'm like, Moriarty, if this Count didn't really do anything wrong and you just hired this down and out guy that was about to die anyway to kill him, then are you really trying... Is this whole thing really towards yours and Albert and Lewis's and Moran and Fred's cause of benefiting society? Or is this just your obsession that you're starting to get with Sherlock and trying to figure him out? So it's a little different than the goal, what's happening now. And I'm like, did you kill someone just to prove a point and try to get Sherlock out of the picture? Or what? We don't know that about the Count. The way that Lestrade, which I like Lestrade's in this, I love it. The way that he talked, it seemed like the servants in any of them didn't have a problem with this Count. Like the one servant, she went up into her room and knitted every night. And then you had the one guy that went down the cellar and drank, but it wasn't like he wasn't told to. And the one girl had a lover and she was out talking to them. And then the other girl, none of them seemed to be... It's not like with the Viscount from episode 4, where those people that were working for him were clearly having a problem. And Moriarty was hired to help them solve it. This seems like it was totally set up just to test Sherlock. And I'm like, that's not quite going on with your plan, sir. So interesting. What's also interesting is that I like both sides. I like Albert and Lewis and Moran and Fred and Moriarty, but I also like Watson and John and Sherlock. It's like they're so wholesome over here, and these guys are so dastardly over here, but in a fun, congenial way that it's like we've spent the first part of the season setting this side up and their justification for everything. And now we're getting Sherlock's side and seeing why he's doing the things that he's doing. And it's like, it's so neat. But yeah, so we could talk about this. Oh my gosh. I love that we get Baker Street. We get 221 Baker Street. I love it. And I love that he's got the apple Sherlock about to go out. And then he sees and he's like him and Mrs. Hudson. I love this. A sassy, younger Mrs. Hudson who gets her drink on and cares about Sherlock but doesn't put up with his crap. I like it. I like this Mrs. Hudson a lot. He's like, oh, you look exceptionally beautiful on this most glorious of days. She's like, cut the crap and give me my money. And I love that he's like, ha ha. Like they animate Sherlock like a damn cat. And I love he's just sitting there like letting her drag at him. I love it. The way they animate him is so wonderful. And he's just like, woof. Even though he's like a little dog. And she's like, don't you woof at me. Oh my God. Don't you bark, you ne'er-do-well. I absolutely love their dynamic. I absolutely love it. And so basically, yeah, Sherlock doesn't have a job. And they're living in a nice part of town. So she's like, I need my money. Bitch, you better have my money. And so that's when he just happens to run into Stamford. And he says, you know that my job is unique, don't you? Waiting sort of is my job. I love that he's like, I can't just go out and find cases. People have to die and they have to come to me. So he's pleading with her. I love it. I'm so curious. And then that's when Stanford comes up. Why are you shouting out here in the road? I love it. And then, so clearly, my good friend, I'm a doctor at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. So, with this iteration of Sherlock, we established that he's a freelance detective, the consulting detective. But I'm wondering, like, what his past history, because he clearly has history with, like, studying chemistry and physics and things like that. So, I'm curious to know how he knows Dr. Stanford from the hospital. And he's like, no, let's loan me some money. And they have a sweat drop. I love it. And so then we have the idea that they're trying to get him a new flatmate to help share the rent. I love it. And Miss Hudson's like, you're the reason I have all these wrinkles. The way that they just animate Sherlock being disgruntled, and it's so sympathetic and wonderful. His expressions are so different than Moriarty, because Moriarty is portrayed very stoically and calm and collected, and he constantly just has this very flat, like he's either has a slightly like smirky, menacing face, or he's very calm and cool and thinking constantly. Like he's very serious, Moriarty is. Whereas Sherlock is just kind of like bumbling and aloof and like, a mystery, who knew? Like I love the dynamic that they're setting up between these two. They're perfect foils for each other. They're like yin and yang, but they're two sides of the same coin, right? So I kind of love it. And I'm curious, going back to episode 6, when Moriarty was saying that you're clearly an Oxbridge man, but you take pride in your blue collar upbringing. So it's like, you're clearly smart and you probably had a decent education, right? Whereas Moriarty just kind of learned it from the ground up, right? So it was almost kind of like he was insulting him to a degree, but Sherlock does show he has a serious side, despite all this like comical, shenanigans that he pulls with Miss Hudson and John. He has a serious side, which is interesting. I wondered if that guy that we just saw was Lestrade. I wonder. I don't know. The Gregson guy, he doesn't like Sherlock at all, which Gregson didn't like Sherlock in the BBC version, so that's funny. That's in the literary version, Gregson was not really ever on board with Sherlock. So, but Lestrade was. So, interesting. So yeah, we get all these flatmates that Sherlock brings in. His candidates. So clearly this is before he talked to Mr. Stanford. And she's like, an audition. I need to make sure. And this all makes sense that she's like, I need somebody that's grounded, that can handle Sherlock's crazy. I don't need crazy on top of crazy. I need someone that can handle it. I also want to note, the people that Sherlock found to be flatmates, he clearly needs the money, and he clearly is on board with the idea of a flatmate. So I'm like, the people that Sherlock knows is interesting. First, he finds the dramatic diva struggling actor who clearly will not be able to make rent, is in the same boat as Sherlock. And I like her eyebrow twitching. She's like, no. I like that. And then we have the person that's like, I heard you wouldn't mind if I brought men back to my room for work. But she had such a deep voice that for a second I was like, is this a woman? I don't know. And then Sherlock's like, it's fine if she brings guys back. And Miss Hudson's like, no. And then he finds a man on the street. And I like that Sherlock's like trying to hold him and like steady him. Like Sherlock clearly cares. And she's like, you're the worst. And I love that she just advances on him. And it's like, you're intentionally making me mad. I'll kick you out if you don't find a good flatmate. And that's when Sherlock's like, I don't know what to do. So yeah. Is there anything you can do to help? And I like that Stanford's like, well, I don't really know, but I know somebody looking for a flatmate. He may be willing. And I love Watson. This version of Watson is great because I feel like the BBC version of Watson's really good. The way that they handle his like modern interpretation. I feel like a lot of iterations of Sherlock, and kind of even to its credit, the original as well, make him kind of like a pudgy, bumbling man that's kind of like, oh, Sherlock, you're amazing, but doesn't really contribute much. But some versions do. But I like that this version of Watson, they embrace that he's the doctor from the Afghan War, and they embrace the fact that he is competent, and he has like this, I love that he's kind of enamored. Watson very much is enamored with Sherlock, just like Albert is enamored with Moriarty. It's kind of the same. I view Albert and Moriarty in the same vein that I view Watson and Sherlock. That they're both kind of enamored with them. Also, Sherlock with his hair down. Oh my gosh. Did not know that I needed this in my life. But here we are. And then he checks. And I like that every time Sherlock is doing something, he's constantly finding little ways to do observations and connect the dots. Like him grabbing the wristwatch and realizing that it was from deployment or from him being discharged, and him like examining everything. And that I love it. I love that even when he's in the moment, he's still finding things to deduce. And then he tests the cow's blood. Poor Mrs. Hudson, though, getting cow's blood all over her nice carpet and rug. No wonder she hates him. She's having to constantly buy new things. But yeah, Sherlock clearly has, and he has all these chemicals and everything in his room, like all the chemicals. And there's the violin. You can see the violin there. I love it. But he has all the chemicals there. So I'm wondering if the hospital, if St. Bartholomew, if he's been getting the chemicals from the hospital and he's been using Stanford to help him get them. Yeah. So I like these, like if we can apply this technology that I've just discovered, then we can like solve some mysteries and prove people innocent. I love it. And then he gets distracted and he's like, wait a minute, who are you? And then that's when Watson introduces himself. But I love it. His library, Sherlock's whole apartment is just books, chemicals, and a violin. That's like all we need. Classic Sherlock. I love it. And I love him with his hair down. It's so nice. And then he like puts it up in his little ponytail. But yeah, he basically goes through and deduces everything about Watson. Again, like I said in the reaction, it makes sense why Moriarty didn't give Sherlock a occupation when he was deducing him, because Sherlock doesn't really have an occupation. It's like a self-given title. Just like he doesn't call Moriarty the crime consultant, he calls him the mathematician because that's what he is. So yeah, so maybe Moriarty doesn't know exactly what Sherlock is, despite his profession. Interesting. But yeah, I like that Watson is instantly enamored with Sherlock. He's like, oh, and he even predicts down to the part where he's like, you write in a violin because you got ink smudges all over. I love it. And it just shows how much he instantly believes in him. And he's like, well, now I got to get you screened by my landlady because she's going to be the hard one to crack. And then we cut to her like just chugging down a big old pint of beer. And Watson's like, oh, wow, you can really pack that away. And she's like, to deal with this man, I have to. And so what's curious is that Sherlock leaves them alone. And he tries to sneak off away from them. And I'm curious if he's trying to sneak away to go find a mystery or something. Or if he really was just going to the bathroom or not. But yeah, but Watson talks him up a big deal. He's even using like the language and everything. And Miss Hudson being like, he squanders his abilities. He could do so much more with his cunning mind to be for the betterment of the world. And then she's like, where are you going? And he's like, I just gotta go to the bathroom. And she's like, you're trying to run away. And he's like, I'm not running. I love it. I love his like just banter with her. It's wonderful. She's like, nary a shred of decency. And I like that she doesn't know what kind of man he is. She says, you know, he's always disappearing. He does these experiments and stuff. But she does say at the end of the day, he is kind. And he does help when she asks for it. And so she's like, he is a good person. He's just very hard to pin down. I love it. I love it. And Watson figures out that she does care about him quite a bit. She worries about him. Kind of like a big sister with a brother, you know. He's a child. I just love this moment. And you get the impression when Sherlock disappeared that he thought that he would just maybe let everything implode and that Miss Hudson would not have him. And so, but then when Sherlock comes back, I like when he comes back, when Miss Hudson gets worked up like this, she's liable to. And then he sees that they're all getting along. And he's surprised. And his face is like, they're actually hitting it off. Was not expecting this. He's like, oh, you're going to let him stay with me, aren't you? I love it. And he's just like, oh, you haven't run him off yet. Interesting. He's a very down-to-earth gentleman, which is what you need. And then in comes in Lestrade. I love it. And I love that Sherlock gets so excited because he's like, oh my gosh, I get to go do a case. I love it. Lestrade. Yep, Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard. Oh, and I really like this version of Lestrade. He's very stoic, serious, like you would expect for the Inspector of Scotland Yard to be. And then, yeah, Sherlock just has a fanboy moment and is like, I'm gonna go do my case. And then he gets charged with murder. So the idea behind all this was that Moriarty was just wanting to get Sherlock locked up and out of the picture for a time, but also wanted to test him. And again, I think that Moriarty is testing fate, because if he hadn't have done this, if he hadn't have set this whole thing up, I think that he could have gotten away with a lot more before Sherlock caught on and did anything, right? But he drugged Sherlock into this, and now I think that was his disaster, his mistake. He drugged Sherlock into this, and it's going to all come back in his face. But we'll see, right? And then, yeah, I like that we have the green of Sherlock getting arrested. And I like that the moment they said the thing with Sherlock, Sherlock's like, excuse me? And his eyes shift and he gets a little bit more serious. I like that for the most part, Sherlock is very jovial and goofy and friendly, but when he gets serious, there's a distinct change. And I like that little change. I think that's going to be interesting to see later on if it happens with Moriarty present or not, right? And then, yeah, old Gregson. I feel like in every iteration, Gregson looks the same. He's just cocky and arrogant. And Sherlock's like, oh, it's you. And I like that Sherlock's a little bit taller, you bohemian. He's a little bit taller than Gregson. And he's like, oh, you do understand this because of prats like you that the art is thought to be ineffectual, right? That expression on his face where he's like, oh, you'll be assistant inspector forever, huh? Like, Sherlock just teasing. I love it. I love it. But here's the thing. They have all the suspects. Like Sherlock said, footprints, easy to manipulate. He's like, you could find the same caliber of gun, everything that Sherlock has, easy to replicate. And Sherlock's like, my gun's never been fired, so go for it. But I like that Lestrade comes to his cell where Sherlock's just sitting there, you know, his legs crossed, just waiting it out. Someone huge is at work behind the scenes. We have to pin that down. I like it. I like Lestrade always looks serious. He's like, I need you to let me see the crime scene because I'll figure out what's going on. Yeah. And so he asks John for help. And then John's like, yeah, sure. And he's like, oh, I'd appreciate it. He's given John something. He's wrote down something on a piece of paper and he's given it to John. So I'm very curious to know what he wrote down and what that is. Like, how does that work? The street has nothing but aristocrat mansions, doesn't it? So, okay. So I'm wondering if Albert lives in this area, what the deal is. I don't know, but Count Drebber's study, we get that. And yeah, everything, it doesn't look like anything suspect, except when you go into the room, there's him on the floor and he's been shot. And there's the blood and the finger. I wondered if they took his hand and just made him write out Sherlock twice. If that was the case, if they had just done that. And that was how they pulled it off. But he said it was somebody else's finger, someone else's hand. 35, born in Wales. 2 maids, a butler who live here in the mansion, and an older woman detached in a detached room who does the cooking. So they established where everybody was that night. One of the 2 live-in maids had a date with her lover, but they never showed up. And so clearly someone forged the note telling her to wait so that she'd be out of the picture, right? Someone forged that note to get her out of the house and away. And then the other maid, they sent her away to go to her family, but then when she arrived, everything was fine. So that's how they forged that, right? And then the other guy, they laced his drink so that he would be passed out during all of it. And then they found, so clearly they did their research to find out everything about these individuals to stage it to where nobody would be awake when it happened. And then, yeah, the old lady, once she's in a room, she doesn't care. She's like, nah, she's hard of hearing. So, yeah, Sherlock doing the thing. I wondered, for a second, I thought Sherlock was going to do the blood test with the cow's blood. I thought they were going to call back to that, and he was going to prove that it wasn't actual blood or something like that. I thought that was the case, but he didn't bring it up. Again, that's an experiment. So maybe it'll come back later that it was something else. So, yeah. And he clearly found something from behind the desk, right? He found something. And he hit something. It looked golden for a second, right? It looked golden. I wanted to pause it and see if I could see what it was. But it looked like he grabbed something that was golden. Oh, like a ring. It was something golden like a ring. Interesting. Or like a bullet. Or maybe one of the bullets. Okay, it could have been one of the golden bullets that he got. All right, all right. What does the consultant detective have to say? And so, yeah, somebody with thicker fingers, which is this guy, obviously. And he missed. So whoever shot him wasn't a competent person firing a firearm. They weren't used to shooting something, and they shot him just to kill him. But he just bled to death and couldn't move. That was it. So, and this is the part where it gets interesting. It was as an amateur performer was doing their utmost to follow a well-crafted script while trying to play the role of the killer, which has been tying to all of Moriarty's cases so far. They've all worked out really well, but at the end of the day, it's been an amateur. It's been somebody that's not Moriarty pulling the trigger, but Moriarty's telling them what to do. Yeah, the one responsible for killing Count Drebber was an amateur, but Sherlock says that there's also someone who's much more capable imparting their wisdom. Yeah, and they're like, oh, so there's a mastermind who put the plan together. And then Sherlock, him like, that's right, there's someone else in this case, pulling all the strings who came up. And then he just gets like this obsessed look on his face, like it's as if, and he thinks back, just like the case on the ship, there's a colossal puzzle visible in the background. And it's just like playing in his head. It's green and it's great. And he's just thinking all about it. And then they snap him back to reality. I love it. I love it. Oh. Yeah, whoever told the real culprit to write in blood, why'd they tell him write your name? And obviously, he's like, I don't know. He's like, we'll have to ask him when we catch him. And that's when Gregson's had enough of it. And so he tells Watson, yeah, he tells him that he gives him the note, or maybe the ring's in the note, or the bullet, rather, to give it to him. Interesting. And then, yeah, just like instead of all green, it's an all red. And we go to this one room with the guy. He's like, as long as you can take your revenge, it doesn't matter that you may lose your life as a result. And I like that it's like very seedy and there's like smoke and everything. Does your volition remain unchanged? And I like that the guy like has the big fingers. He's sitting there clutching himself. He's like, of course. Sooner or later, I'll fall victim to this incurable disease and I haven't much time. My wish has already come true. And I like that his eyes are like glowing red and he's mad. And then clearly he says, my life means nothing. And then there's Moriarty. His death is near and he's all alone in the world. He's the best man suited to carry out this plan. This will allow me to test him. But here's the thing. It's like, that guy, yeah, he's near death and he has nothing to lose, but I'm like, you're killing him too. So, interesting. It's like, Moriarty, you're trying to rid the world of impure people. I get it, but your mission's kind of taking a little detour so that you can test Sherlock because you have this possibly unhealthy obsession / relationship developing with him. So, and Sherlock is like so obsessed with the mystery of it. He's like, I want to figure out who this third party is. They were the same party on the ship, I'm sure of it. So, ooh, I love this. I absolutely love it. This is so much fun. This episode, I will take a little bit of a break in between parts 1, act 1, act 2. This cut off at a clear halfway point. Episode 6 and 7, it was like, it just ended and right at a cliffhanger and you're like, I need to know what happens next. But this one, I can take a day or 2 and then do act 2 because yeah. So I'm so excited. I'm like, Moriarty, I don't know if you should have done that. Y'all not did that, but very curious, y'all. I'm curious to know what you all thought. I love Sherlock in this so far. I love Watson, Miss Hudson. It's a great episode to introduce all 3 of them. And now we're going to get Watson in on the case, which is very intriguing. It'll be neat to see Watson doing some deducing. That'll be cool. So I'm curious to know what you all thought of this episode. I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction. But in the meantime, I also hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 9 of Moriarty the Patriot. Bye.